Funny thing about the internet, really funny thing. A bloke watches 60 seconds of your life while eating crisps in bed with one sock on and suddenly decides he's Sigmund Freud. Apparently, I rattle on. Apparently, I think I know it all. Apparently, I love hearing myself talk. And then comes my favourite part, my favourite bit. You're not a doctor, psychiatrist, therapist, counsellor. That's not true. Right? Okay. Because obviously, only people qualified to speak about psychological suffering are people with laminated badges and a LinkedIn profile. Good. That's where all the wisdom comes from now. Okay. Well, I have to accept. Not lived experience. Of course not. Why would that? Why didn't get anything from lived experience? Not grief. No, of course. Not survival. Not years of watching people psychologically unravel in family court. Of course not. Of course not. No. Only Nigel with a postgraduate diploma and a mindfulness podcast. Okay, wonderful. Okay. Imagine saying to a man living through alienation, you're not qualified to talk about alienation. Imagine that. That's like finding somebody crawling out of a shipwreck and going, actually, mate, unless you're a marine biologist, you're gonna have to stop talking about the ocean, unfortunately. Modern people are incredible. And the strangest thing is, he genuinely thought I was attacking fathers. That's what fascinated me. Because I wasn't talking about those dads. No. I was talking about me, myself, and I see my behavior in others too, but I was talking about me. But that's the bit people miss when they're emotionally defensive, isn't it? I know exactly what the process does to men psychologically because I've felt it crawling through my own nervous system at 3 a.m. in the morning like a psychological parasite wearing a cord. I know what it feels like staring at your phone, waiting for contact updates, like a divorced stockbroker during the collapse of the Lehman Brothers. No message again. Excellent. I love that. Love that for my cortisol levels. I know what it feels like walking around Tesco, looking completely normal externally, while internally your brain sounds like she's turned the kids against me. You're losing the kids. You've lost the kids. You're being erased. You've been erased. Completely healthy atmosphere. Mentally, absolutely. And the mad thing is, people think male suffering always looks dramatic. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it looks like a bloke standing silently in Aldi, trying not to emotionally disintegrate near the reduced bakery section. And that's what people don't understand about grief. Real grief is often quiet. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits there, heavy, humiliating, persistent, like emotional asbestos. And after enough time, something strange starts happening to men psychologically. The suffering stops being something they experience, and guess what? It starts becoming who they are, and that's dangerous. And that's the bit nobody wants to discuss, because modern culture has accidentally turned victimhood into identity currency, especially online. Everybody's performing emotional collapse publicly, hoping, praying strangers will just finally hand them the validation they never received privately. Middle-aged men writing Facebook essays at 1:43 a.m. like wounded Shakespeare. Characters holding a vape and a Monster energy drink. I miss my kids. She destroyed me. The system is corrupt. And before everybody starts hyperventilating in the comments, yes, sometimes those things are true. That's what makes this whole thing so psychologically brutal. The pain is real, but pain being real does not automatically make every behavior inside that pain healthy. And that's the part people can't tolerate hearing. Because once somebody emotionally fuses with suffering, any challenge to their behavior feels like an attack on their humanity itself. And that's why some men got angry at that video. Not because I was mocking fathers, because I was describing something they secretly recognized in themselves. And recognition without readiness creates rage. Unfortunately, that's human psychology. Stoicism was never men shouldn't cry. That's internet level understanding from people who think Marcus Aurelius was some sort of probably a gym influencer. Stoicism was about refusing to let suffering hijack your identity. That's a huge difference. Huge difference. It means, yes, this hurts. Yes, this is unfair. And yes, this may psychologically destroy parts of you, but also you still have responsibility over what this pain turns you into. That sentence alone will make some people furious because accountability feels offensive once the ego starts bleeding heavily enough. And family court absolutely accelerates that process. Family court is one of the only places on earth where a man can be psychologically amputated while simultaneously expected to remain calm, polite, and emotionally regulated. Please discuss the destruction of your own family professionally and within an allocated time frame. Basically, emotional speed dating with safeguarding allegations. No matter how you behave, somebody will always interpret it negatively anyway. Too emotional, unstable, too calm, manipulative, too articulate, narcissistic, too upset, concerning, too composed, calculated. You could probably burst into tears while rescuing an orphaned Labrador, and somebody in Kafkas would still write something like, "Father presented with possible emotional dysregulation whilst around spaniels." And once men realize this, some completely collapse psychologically because suddenly they understand something horrifying. The system does not reward visible suffering. It often punishes it. And that's not how things should be. But pretending otherwise helps nobody. And that was my entire point. Not fathers are the problem, but pain can quietly transform men into something they no longer recognize. Obsessive, reactive, impulsive, consumed, emotionally addicted to proving innocence to people who were never listening anyway. And social media obviously makes it worse because now suffering has an audience. That changes everything. It changes everything psychologically because attention can start feeling like healing, but it isn't healing at all. It's anesthetic, temporary relief, masquerading as recovery. And if you're not careful, you slowly become dependent on public sympathy to regulate your own nervous system. And that's dark, but it's true. It is true. And maybe that's why the comment didn't really offend at all. It interested me more than anything else because underneath all of that anger and all of that rage, I recognized the fear. The fear that if suffering itself isn't morally perfect, then maybe behavior still matters. And that's terrifying for people deep in pain because responsibility feels cruel when you're emotionally, but responsibility is the only thing nobody can physically take from you. Family court can take your time, your money, your peace, your reputation, your sleep, your appetite, your sanity. But once you surrender responsibility for your own behavior, you start helping the destruction finish itself. And maybe that's the darkest truth nobody wants to admit. Some people don't actually want healing. They want permanent emotional permission to remain broken because healing requires self-awareness, discipline, humility, reflection, and all four force you to confront yourself. It's far easier to stay angry online, far easier to keep performing psychological collapse publicly while strangers clap supportively from the comments section like emotional seagulls fighting over chips. Stay strong, mate. Yep, she's evil, mate. Yep, you deserve better, mate. Meanwhile, nobody's actually healing, just bleeding together aesthetically. And maybe that's what unsettles people about my video. Not arrogance, not qualifications, not ego, self-awareness. Because once a man can start honestly observing what pain is doing to his own mind, he can never fully romanticize the suffering again. And that's a lonely place to arrive psychologically because you realize something most people never do. Sometimes the greatest danger to being a broken man is not his pain, it's how comfortable he becomes performing it.